Right, we got a quorum. Yes, we do. Ken Wren, is it?
Yes,
Ken.
I'm here.
Yeah. Welcome. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. You've got 3 minutes. After, when you're nearing 3 minutes, you hear the buzzer go, which means we need to sum up. Then you've got time for questions.
Yep.
Okay. The floor is yours.
After, when you're nearing 3 minutes, you hear the buzzer go, which means we need to sum up.
Mr. Rand, do you have the live stream on in the background?
Okay.
Can you turn the live stream off if you got it in the background?
There's a 30-second delay on the live stream, I think. Yeah.
Look, it's interesting, eh?
You okay, Mr. Rand?
I'm here. Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
3 minutes will start now.
Okay. Tēnā koutou katoa. Look, I believe that council is the voice of local people representing and balancing a range of interests. And in preparing my submission, and I have sent a copy, so I presume councillors have got it, I have considered the empathy review. And while I agree with a number of the principles expressed, I do arrive at a different conclusion. There are some comments that resonate with me in particular, and that's about the need for councillors to hear the diversity of people in the district, not just the loudest voices or those who have time or access. And that most people do want councillors to do what's best for Kapiti as a whole. I think that the job of councillors is to reach out and understand the district, not the responsibility of people to make themselves known and to make themselves heard. And I think it's important that councillors have time to hear and understand the viewpoints and issues from local people. I would contend that competent councillors should be able to balance local community perspectives and views with a district-wide perspective, but they should be able to make informed judgments and decisions. And I don't buy into the argument that for this to occur, you need to have a ward and district-wide councillor mix. I'm a fan for the all-ward councillor model, and I believe it would drive the need for balancing a local and district-wide perspective. It would result in the rigorous debate that's needed and the strong and balanced decision-making. I also think it would strengthen the feedback that councillors could provide to constituents because they're having to consider all issues at those two levels. I believe we should retain the old wards of Otaki, Waikanai, Paraparaumu and Raumati Paikakariki, but we should increase the number of councillors to 11. They would be allocated 2 to Otaki, 3 to Waikanai, 4 to Paraparaumu and Raumati Paikakariki 2. And that's based on about 5,000 constituents in each of those wards. The model may well require councillors to need better support from the council structure so that people can make appointments to see councillors. And I think each councillor could also hold local meetings, say quarterly, to update constituents, flag issues that are arising and get input. After all, the purpose is to be the voice of local people representing and balancing a range of interests. I know that some would argue that residents are unlikely to attend such meetings, but I believe that the current disinterest is because of an inability for constituents to feel they can either be heard or their views considered. Now, in that model, I don't see, I watched a number of people about community boards. I don't see a place for community boards because I don't think they have the influence at the table where decisions are taken. So, yeah, that's my perspective on this particular review, and I think it's absolutely appropriate that it's taking place.
Right. Okay. Questions? Councillor Coates.
Kia ora, Ken. Thank you very much for speaking to your submission. We've heard from a number of submitters and read a number of submissions that are in strong support of community boards. If the council was to consider retaining community boards, would your view still be that small wards would be preferred?
I think so, yes, absolutely. As I say, the decisions are made at the council table. You know, the community boards can advocate, argue, but they actually don't have the power to make decisions.
Thank you, Ken.
Right. Anybody else? No. Councillor Provanov.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Thank you, Ken, for your submission and coming along today. So I just wanted to ask you if you'd actually ever had any interactions with your local community board, and I suppose this is more the lines of actually just solving a problem that you couldn't solve yourself, rather than it having to be taken to council for a decision. And I think sometimes they actually work really well like that in terms of solving problems that an individual can't do by themselves, but it doesn't have to come, you know, around the council table.
Yeah, I have had. I was the president of Club Vista for 4 years, from 2015 to 2019, so through the amalgamation with the RSA. I'm currently a member of the Boat Club, and so have had dealings around, a number of issues that have gone on there, from beach bylaws to, and have been to meetings that the local community board have organised. But at all of those, I just think that we have to put the resources into areas that are going to influence the decisions. And at the end of the day, as I say, they're an advocacy group, and that's great. But, their voice is not heard where it matters.
Thank you.
Right, Ken. There are no more questions, so thank you for the time you've taken to engage with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next is Natia Haumiaki Pakakariki.
They have withdrawn.
Gerald, Gerald, you there?
Yes, I am.
Right. Okay, Mike. You've got 5 minutes, and then just before the 5 minutes, the buzzer will go. You need to sum up, and then you got question time.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks. Thanks, Gerald Rise. I'm representing the Waikano Beach Residents Society Incorporated. We thought we'd put in a bit of a background of what democracy should look like to start with, and because democracy is a subject that should not be taken lightly, and changes in democratic structures even more so. A quick reminder, a definition that we've come up in terms of democracy: government by people, especially a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly and indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held elections. Cornerstones of democracy include freedom of assembly, speech, inclusiveness, equality, membership, consent, voting, and right to life and minority rights. Further details of a lot of these elements around democracy are actually present in the Local Government Act and also the Local Government Commission's booklet. So some of the features of an ideal democracy we've got down here: effective participation, equality in voting, informed electorate, citizen control of the agenda, inclusion, and fundamental rights, as we talked about before. What we did as a society in terms of making our decisions, we actually looked at setting up some principles that we wanted to adopt in terms of the questions that you'd asked. The principles we put down were that there should be adequate numbers of councillors and community board members to represent the significantly different communities of interest and expanding population of the Kapiti Coast at the various levels of local government. We do not support a decrease from the present number. Secondly, that each councillor should have a direct line accountability to a community of interest. Thirdly, that any change in democracy structure should be voted on by the Kapiti Coast population and not driven by inadequate surveys and current council structure. Cost should not be a criteria for modifying the democracy provisions of the coast. Future population growth should be a key factor considered in democracy provisions, and minority groups and communities should not be penalised in any structure established. The LGA 2002 states the provisions that a community board, which we do support, should be able to carry out in terms of their range of activities. In terms of the specific questions that the council asked, do you agree with the number of retaining 10 councillors and a mayor? We were neutral on this. We said 11's an odd number, so that's useful in terms of decision making and getting majority decision votes. But we were concerned about the democracy provisions of the casting vote, and we believe that it should be mandatory that the status quo be maintained as normal standard meeting procedure and any casting vote that's put forward. Currently, Waikanai has been underrepresented significantly, and we also note that even in the council provisions that were put forward, there's still the 10% rule is still not met. So we were wondering how this was going to be achieved. The second point, do we agree with the 5 ward councillors and 5 district-wide councillors? Here we strongly disagree. We believe having 5 district-wide councillors should be disbanded, and that all councillors should be have direct accountability to wards and hence constituents. All councillors should have a district-wide accountabilities as well, representing all the features of the district. We believe the current process disenfranchises the wards. Do you agree with combining most of current power param with Waikanai wards? We strongly disagree here. As the character, population mix, service requirements, estimated rate and direction of future expansion are distinctly different, as is the physical character and clear separation by the Waikanai River. Waikanai has a high population of seniors, retirement and rest homes, facilities, and their specific health and transport needs. And therefore we consider it should be separate wards between Power Param and Waikanai. In terms of community boards, we agree with keeping community boards, but consider their processes, modus operandi and accountabilities need to be markedly updated and upgraded to get more community interaction and act as a test bed for novel and future-looking district policies and community approaches. Community boards should be given adequate financial resources to carry out their functions. Do we agree with the new boundary lines? As stated previously, we do not agree with these because we want to see Waikanai ward maintained. 2 other points we'd like to make. We consider that the community board should receive the Secretariat support to enable them to carry out the activities that were identified earlier, recognising that councillors have direct access to the Executive Council. We think that 5% of the rates for each ward should be allocated to each community board for the support of ward projects. And this is really getting down to how communities can be represented and have projects done at their own ward structures. Also, we just wanted to note that Waikanai stands to lose its $1 million Capital Improvement Fund grant, which was gained through the amalgamation of past restructurings, and we would not like to see that lost, and that should be still fully dedicated to Waikanai. So we have a list of distribution of councillors we've got there: 2 for Otaki, 3 for Waikanai, 4 for Power Param, 2 for Paikokariki, giving 11, and you might have another one if you wanted to have the mayor as an independent. We don't believe in having any district-wide councillors, and councillors should preferably live and have property in their own wards. We believe you should change the boundaries to make the populations meet the 10% rule. And we have a final point that we'd like to ask is how will councillors address their conflicts of interest in coming to a decision on this particular consultation? Thank you.
Right. Questions, Councillor McCann.
Kia ora, thank you very much for that presentation. I'd just like to drill down, if I can, about direct accountability. What does that mean to you in practical terms?
It means that any person can ring up that particular person at any time and get some feedback on their particular area of concern for that ward.
So can I just check, given that our numbers are currently freely available and anybody, and quite often they do ring me up for advice, usually around the portfolio I have, how does changing to a ward structure actually change the direct accountability?
So at present, the at-large councillors and the mayor can outvote any ward. They have a majority in the decision-making around the council table. And we think that's unacceptable, basically, because each individual ward should be represented by their parties, and the structure we've given would mean that all of them, no one ward would dominate, and they would have to work together to get the provisions that they want. Under the current structure, the 5 at-large plus the mayor can outvote any of the wards in terms of anything happening in the ward areas.
If the mayor is allowing me to, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of the first question, which is what the difference with the direct accountability is. I know what you've just said in terms of people being able to outvote, but if you were divided into smaller wards, then the wards that you're not providing the service to may outvote you. Could you just tell me what you actually mean by direct accountability, other than people being able to ring us up on phones, etc., which they currently already do?
So we see our ward councillor here, Jocelyn. Now, she talks to us regularly. She meets with us regularly. She turns up to our meetings at the Resident Society as a councillor. And so she understands what's happening in the community, understands what our needs are, and hopefully reflects that through both the community board and representation around the table. Now, the at-large councillors don't do that. They may or may not turn up occasionally. They have no direct interest in what's happening here at the beach, and we reckon we've got a unique circumstance here with changes in roading and stuff like that, which has meant there's been a marked change in the population that we've got here and the services that we need to fulfill that going forward.
So what you're actually saying is that direct accountability means you being able to eyeball them. So in other words, to have direct accountability with any structure ongoing, all councillors should turn up to all meetings?
Not all meetings, but at least they can be eyeballed by the people that are there when we have meetings and we raise issues about stuff. We would like to see that those people are there.
Cool, thank you.
And they live with the people in that region, so it's in their interest to take those features forward. I would have thought to council.
Right, we've got a question from Councillor Coates.
Kia ora, Gerald. I just want to tease out a comment that you made, and it was also in your submission, that anyone elected must live within the area. And look, this isn't about me. I live in the area that I'm currently elected. However, when I was first elected, I lived in the Horowhenua district under the Horowhenua District Council and was elected to the Otaki Community Board and have remained elected to that area since. And so I do want to tease out your thinking around that. What if a person isn't living in Waikanae, for example, but may have a business in Waikanae? Do they not then have a vested interest or a say in what happens in Waikanae if they have a business there and employ people there?
Yeah, that's a good point, but I think it relates to the last question basically about the accountability, direct accountability. I think people that are living in the area, and I'd be happy to include shops and stuff like that as well, where you're employing people. I think that's sensible, but I think where you've got a direct link to the community that you're you've been voted in by in that, then I think you've got a stronger interest.
Well, look, to clarify, you might not have shops, you could have commercial properties or a farm or so forth. So anyway, it's helpful to tease it out a little bit further. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Rabanov.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Gerald, for your presentation on behalf of the Waikanai Beach Residents Society and the submission. So I have two questions. One relates to district-wide councillors. So I'm just so in the role that you have as chair of that group, I'm just interested to know what interest, I suppose, and what advocacy district-wide councillors have in terms of the role that you have as the chair of the society.
A good point, actually. I think where there are district-wide elements, so look, we've been raising the issue of what's going to happen when Transmission Gully opens, for instance, and the new highway. We can see a massive explosion in people wanting to turn up to the beach, Waikanai Beach, and therefore we need the facilities, the parking, the rubbish, the toilet, and other proper park facilities. So we think that a district-wide councillor might have a broader picture around some of those elements. But I think a person that's living there and experiencing some of those things will have a closer relationship to what some of the issues that we find. And I think you would understand that yourself, actually living here and dealing with us. I think there's just less interest. They might be useful at looking at the bigger picture, but I don't know if they address the specific communities of interest, and that's what the requirements of the democracy provisions of local council need to address.
Thank you. So my other question relates to the proposal that's on the table at present to do away with community boards, and I think so you're in a key position, hopefully, to answer this question. That as a group, I'm interested to know how you would feel, how your group would feel about taking over the role of the community board, and whether you think that you could actually do a good job on advocacy, for example, or providing information to councillors or council staff and get a result if you were put in that position?
I think we need to look at statutory provisions versus voluntary groups with limited resources, I suppose, and I don't think we could actually address the sorts of things that need to be addressed that the community board does themselves. And I don't see that advocacy groups like us do that. We don't get any provisions to run the organisation per se. It's all voluntary, and we can't, there's obviously not enough hours in the day to do some of the stuff. We're not fully employed to do it. So I don't think we could actually meet the needs that we would have to do. I think that the community board does. And they've got a different statutory role, basically, which gives them direct access to the decision makers.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
No more questions, so thank you, Gerald, for taking the time to engage with us.
Thanks everybody.
Right, next presenter James Westbury from the Waikanai Community Board.
Is it working now? Just one thing, listening to the comments today, it's really enlightening hearing the submitters and reading through the submissions, and I think this is a really good example of where our council has potentially significantly misjudged and misread our community with regards to what it's projecting for representation for itself and as a community for the people who it stands for. Just as a Waikanai Community Board, I just really want to highlight where we stand on these. The Waikanai Community Board does not support or agree with the premise that we are not a community of interest. Fundamentally, Waikanai is very different. We are delineated by a river. Unfortunately, we're separated by a highway. However, our community, its demographics, its population profile, its health needs, its transport aspirations and requirements, its sense of place. We're a Waikanai village. I don't see those, and neither do any of the constituents in our area, see us being mildly or significantly part of the Paraparaumu ward. And that's a significant proposal because the way in which this is proposed, you're casting Waikanai as part of the Paraparaumu area. And by doing that, you deprive us of effective representation. This is all about fair representation. What we've been asking for some time is actually proper and appropriate and fair representation for Waikanai. At the moment, we do not have fair and appropriate representation. If you look at the statistics, the percentage by which we're out for our population versus other districts is considerable. By doing what is proposed in this proposal, it is going to make it worse. Our population is actually going to suffer in not being represented. With regards to getting rid of community boards, the Waikanai Community Board do not agree with grassroots democracy. Local government encourage real grassroots democracy where you're in touch with your local residents. You actually understand and advocate for them. The Waikanai Community Board has been very engaged in our community with regards to the libraries, with regards to the development of Waikanai Park, but also participating and supporting the Mahara Gallery, for example. These are significant and key projects where Council has clearly recognised the benefits of those, and the participation of our Community Board has helped realise those aspirations and dreams for our community. In terms of the consolidation of the Ward Councillor and to a pan Waikanai / Paraparaumu Directorate, we actually see there's actually benefit in having real basis for another ward councillor for our area. In terms of how you cut and slice that, unfortunately I haven't got the maths to decide that, and we haven't put that as a proposal, but our views are that we support ward-based elected members. And this comes down to it in a T. It's very seldom have I actually seen a ward-based councillor attend our community board. I could look at all of you on the face really and say, actually, how many of you have or haven't attended, and your frequency of attendance, of participation in grassroots democracy. That's actually an insult where you say we're ineffective when you can't turn up and show us the courtesy of participating. It's quite regularly I get the apologies from our mayor to our community board meetings, but seldom attend. And we wonder why community boards can't be effective when we don't see district-wide councillors in particular showing a real interest in our community. How will we ever see a district-wide councillor represent us in a community when they can't be bothered attending our grassroots democracy? The next thing is, in terms of just where the community board sees what we should be doing, I think we need to be very careful about the disestablishment of community boards. I think they've been underutilised, under-resourced, and actually it's clearly, in the LTP round, you're prepared to invest money in community boards, but nothing came of it. Where do we go from here? I don't know what the solution is, but my view and that of my board is that we support the establishment of 10 ward-based councillors based on population, so we have a fair share of representation, the retention of all community boards, and the retention of the current ward boundaries. Thank you.
Right. Questions. Councillor Coates is first.
I think Councillor Elliott was, but I'm...
Oh, just showing here, Councillor Coates. Councillor Elliott, did you want... Yeah,
right.
but he doesn't show up here.
All right.
Anyway, you've got the floor.
Thank you for coming to speak today, James. I guess I just wanted to point out that as another member of your board has spoken about an hour ago and made the same mistake in stating that no ward or district-wide councillors attend your meetings. You've only had 4 meetings this year. I've attended 2 of them. My colleague Councillor Halliday has attended those 2 same meetings. And so I just think it's a little bit unfair jump in and make a sweeping statement like that?
We've been in place for nearly 2 years now, so I think it's a pretty good statement to make, Jackie, in response.
We do attend your meetings, but the point is that we engage online and in different ways with your community board, all the community boards, which is particularly difficult with Waikanae because you've refused to have a Facebook page or any online presence. So I'm just wondering if a lot of the feedback we're getting is that the community boards really, really need to engage with younger people, the TikTok people, the Facebook people, and the whole community in many different ways. So could I ask if the Rural Community Board would consider
we have actually made a concerted effort
not
to
have a
respond
debate.
to... let me respond, please.
Now, hang on a moment. Just mark your tone, okay? What I'm saying is, don't let get into a debate at this point.
No, well, the Waikanae Community Board is actively participating in Facebook now to engage the younger age group. Waikanae, and if you understand our demographics, is mostly people over 65. We are very much in touch with them. Not to say we're involved with the headmasters of both schools, for example. We participate quite actively in that. We engage with the Paraparaumu College in particular, where the majority of our students go. So we are engaged, and we, it's like everything. We are limited by the resources that we get provided by council to support us in our endeavours. So, a lot of where we are not able to deliver our full potential is because of resourcing and support.
Right, Councillor Coates.
Kia ora, James. Look, one of the benefits of the proposal that we've got is we've got a range of ideas that have come through the submissions. I think we said there was 531 compared to the last time we did this where there was 10, and out of that there has come some good nuggets of information. You made the comment around the lack of district-wide councillors attending the community board meetings. Equally, we could say that there is a lack of attendance at council meetings from community board members, and I wondered whether you were able to give us some insight into why, given the open opportunity to community board members to attend briefings and meetings, that isn't given to other board members around the country, why we don't see the take-up of that. And then I have a follow-up from that.
Can I just answer that? In terms of, I think, the impact of community board members are paid probably a quarter of what you are as councillors. You're actually paid additional benefits for participating in your committee meetings. I think the amount of effort and time that's required in terms of, and the obligations on community board members actually affect some of their participation in some of those meetings. In terms of our role is to advocate, and sometimes participation in a meeting is not advocating for your community if it's not related to your community.
So could I just clarify, essentially what you're saying is for us to see more participation from community board members around the council table, they need to be remunerated more?
Well, in terms of, for your participation, I think there is remuneration issues. It's continually come through. Holly Evans in particular makes that comment routinely. Some of the Otaki community board members frequently highlight that as an issue. They have day jobs, and I think on average, most elected members sitting around the table now are probably pulling 45 to 50,000 out of the council coffers for their participation in council meetings. I think the average community board member gets probably between $5,000 and $8,000 to participate in community-based things such as this. So I think that does need to be addressed.
Right, the second question, I will just add, as a fellow community board member, I attended just as many meetings as a councillor on $7,000. But that being said, the second question I have is around, in your submission you talked around that you've made several requests around more empowerment and more support and responsibility. The Mayor has also publicly said that an email was sent to community board members in February last year, and that there was no response from individual members or boards. It'd be helpful for council to hear from you yourself what those specific requests were from yourself or the board to enable you to, what did you specifically ask for?
If the Mayor might look at his email, he'll probably remember that I was requesting greater delegations in some areas. In terms of, this is something we've asked for several times. You've even been around the table, James, when we've asked for greater delegations, and you've been one of the people who hasn't supported it, ironically. But, for a community board to be effective, the delegations that we've got are very limited. Naming roads, it's rather tokenism, to be honest.
Yeah, could I clarify that further? Because again, I think this discussion's helpful. We've had sweeping statements around more training, and then when we've pressed further, for example, Shelley couldn't actually give more examples of what that training looked like. So,
Training on
what in terms of those delegations, just the sweeping word of delegations is broad. Again, it would be helpful to understand what are these more powers that boards are, genuine question, what are they looking to actively do more of?
In terms of having a greater ability to influence and actually make decisions on behalf of our community that genuinely affect our community. So, we don't get the ability to, say, manage parks and reserves budgets, for example. They are things that have been put forward to Guru. There are opportunities about, beautification projects, for example, for our town centres, for example.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I just want to sort of pick up on, in your submission, the discussion you've got around the preference for ward councillors and the focus on that. With that, were you envisaging something like in the small wards model? That was one of the options that came up in the earlier briefings for councillors, in terms of having those 7 smaller geographically focused wards, and then having that model with community boards, and that model would have resulted in the Waikanai, or have Waikanai Beach and Peka and sort of one ward up to halfway up Te Moana Road, and then you've got Waikanai Township and up Rekarangi into another ward there. So you'd get effectively 2 councillors covering that area, the Waikanai area. Is that the sort of ward model
in terms of, I haven't structured out a envisaged ward boundary. In terms of what I do want to ensure is that we have fair representation for our population, and at the moment the proposal at the moment has the opportunity and a high risk that we won't get any representation, which deprives our community of elected participation. In fact, when you look at a lot of the documentation, as a councillor, if you've got, and I think it came up within the Waikanai Beach Residents Society mentioned, if you've got skin in the game and you're part of a community and people are going to meet you and look you in the eye, you've got a greater potential for accountability, because actually if you don't represent the individuals, or that you've got a greater chance of not being elected next time. That's real grassroots, and if you look at a lot of progressive nations around the world, our centralisation of decision making actually destroys democracy, because actually we should be concerned that we're seeing less and less participation and voter turnout, and actually I suspect as we remove real grassroots democracy and local engagement and participation, that we will lose more and more people having an interest in democracy, like actually having a chance to be involved in democracy. And I think community boards are a really good breeding ground for people to dip their toe into local government, into big P politics potentially, and it's a training ground for greater aspirations and engagement in civic service.
Cool. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Holbrook.
Yeah, thanks for coming along, James, and the points you've made. I just wanted to ask your response to something. I mean, you said that the community board supported the Mahara project, and certainly the Mahara Trust Board is very grateful for the $250,000 that was contributed towards that project. The other thing that I instigated a couple of years ago was board representation on the trust. Since then, we've had 2 representatives, both of whom have resigned from the Waikanai Community Board. So there's a bit of a problem with turnover at the moment. I wondered if you wanted to comment on that.
Oh, I can't determine who puts their name up for a local body election, and and people who voted for them have indicated that they would be put forward, and some of them resigned on their own account. Sometimes local participation in democracy is hard work, and some people haven't got the skin for it. It is hard work. It's relentless. It's unthanked. And some people can continue to do it, and some people can't.
Okay. I'm just interested if you can see something that could be improved in that regard, because one of the things we talked about was that for such a low remuneration, which you've talked about, and such a heavy workload, and some of the pressures that we all face as elected members, which you've just talked about, there is the feature of community boards is that you are expected to keep doing it for 3 years. And the other kinds of representation that we talked about, one of the things that we talked about was that that wouldn't necessarily be the case, and there could be more fluidity and less onerous kind of commitment from people. Do you have any comment about that?
I do. I'm really concerned about cherry-picked individuals to participate in local, what would you call it, engagement opportunities, because actually I think anybody knows quite well if you handpick or select individuals, you can bias any decision you want, and I think actually those individuals aren't accountable to their community and they're not elected. So that makes me very nervous when you use a hand-picked group of people to determine how a community should be when they've got no accountability back to them.
Well, I don't think anybody's suggesting that. Thanks for your submission today.
Sorry, Janet, but that's what's implied, that through the proposal that you would have hand-picked groups of individuals to work with and engage the community on potential projects. That's exactly what it's implying.
Councillor Hempel.
Yeah, kia ora, James. You mentioned just in your oral submission then, and also through your written submission, that there's a potential risk that Waikanae wouldn't have representation around the council table, which is something that you've... So I just wonder too what your thoughts are around that potentially swinging the other way, because if the two wards were combined to be a central ward, there's also a chance that all three of the ward councillors for that central ward could be from Waikanae. So I wonder if you'd like to kind of explain with that in the mix too.
But one of the points I made, it's about fair representation. I'm not asking for over-representation. I'm asking for fair representation for our community. I'm not asking to deprive another community of fair representation either. I feel that the Paraparuma ward should have fair representation also. It's something that we owe our communities to ensure that they are fairly and equitably represented, to try and ensure that their voices are heard. It's not about trying to take over another electorate. I don't think that's in anybody's interest.
Right, there are no more questions. Thank you for your time and interface with us. Thank you very much. That brings us end to the hearing for today. I just want to make a procedural motion that we adjourn this meeting to 9 o'clock tomorrow to continue the hearing. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Compton. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Meeting is now adjourned.